All right. And welcome back, you guys, to the Self Selecting Podcast. I am your host, Corey Hagman. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here. Uh, Real quick, I just want to say I really appreciate, I'm really shocked with this past month releasing the complete gluten building guide, hearing the feedback that you guys have given me, seeing it. I mean, like some of you have shared it on your stories. It it means a lot because, like, I wrote this guide, I wrote it largely because I was like, "Okay, like, I want to have a concise way, I wanna have a repeatable and, like, structured way to explain these movements to clients," because, frankly, I'm getting so many questions from clients about, like, the technical aspect of performing a B stance RDL, performing a split squat, and in actuality, when I started writing it, I was like, okay, well, this is going to be a valuable piece of content for me because I'm going to have it streamlined. I'm not going to have to start from scratch every single time. But then, especially for clients who are like, I need a reference point, I need something to refer back to when obviously you're not with me because you're virtually my coach. If I'm in session, I need to know like what are the bullet points, what are the things to keep in mind. So I did a consult with someone just yesterday and she bought the guide. She's not a client of mine, but she's been with her coach for a while. And even though her coach, they don't do her training, she's like, I knew that I needed help. I knew that I needed someone to kind of guide me on what I wasn't executing to my fullest capacity. So, I mean, like, even just hearing in a short amount of time, like 3 weeks of having it, she's like, I already feel my glutes better in my RDLs. I've already fixed my lower back pain. I already feel like more confident going into my sessions. These are all things that like you hope you hope we're gonna come across like in a product like this, but it means a lot. It feels good to know that you find value in it, just like I found value in it. So yeah, if you're interested in purchasing the glute building guide, it is a 74 page, it is a monster ebook. It is not just a cookie cutter program. It's not just a list of exercises. I really break down the principles, the training ideology that I prescribe to, that I was ultimately able to build my glutes in my last build, 4 inches. It's the same principles I use for myself and I use for all of my clients. So if you're interested in purchasing that, link to that can be found in the description of the video down below and on my website, Corey Fit, CORYFIT. Anyways, we are diving right in today. You saw the title, you saw the thumbnail, you know what we're talking about today. How long can you diet? And this question, it came up a couple weeks ago with a client that I've had who she's been so successful. I mean, she came to me early last year and she's like, I don't think I can lose weight. I feel like there's something wrong with me genetically. I feel like there's just something making it at this point impossible. I know that it's going to show up in health outcomes in the next 10 years. She's higher body fat, or she started higher body fat. She's like, so I want to get a hold on it. I've tried yo-yo diets in the past. I've tried crash diets. I've tried fad diets. Um, Hopefully you have an answer. You have something, a method that I haven't tried because at this point I'm at a loss. And we've been working together for, at this point, over a year. She was able to lose 30 pounds in her fat loss phase with very, like, I cannot stress this enough, so minimal changes to her calories. And I mean, again, like for me, I'm like, I can hope that'll happen. I can hope that it's going to be a breeze. It ultimately, I mean, like that ease of fat loss that she experienced, it came down to the fact that she was adherent and she listened to exactly what I said every week. And we would do weekly calls and she would check in and she'd be like, this is what I'm struggling with. And I would give her advice and I would tell her, be like, here's what I would do in your case. And then she would just implement it. And it was very low, like there was such little latency between her ability to take what I was saying and then implement it. It was like next day, cool, problem solved. And we're at the point where now her goals have evolved into maybe wanting to compete. And I think, that's a great goal. I think Like it's motivating in a lot of ways. And she feels like she's found like her footing and community within the fitness space. So now she's aspiring to do something even more challenging, which in her mind a year ago, it was like, I don't even know if I can get down to 25 or 20% body fat. So like now that she's been able to conquer that goal, it's like, of course, naturally, it's a very human response to move that goalpost. And we ended the fat loss phase, but over the course of the fat loss phase, she'd asked me, she's like, "Can we just keep this going, like, all the way until stage?" Like, 'cause that goal of wanting to compete, I mean, it came up, I wouldn't say early into her fat loss phase, but right at the point that she had lost, like, 20 pounds, it was like, "No, I think I might wanna do this, like, at a higher level." And what I told her is like, we can definitely set that as our North Star. We can definitely keep that as like the thing that we're ultimately aiming for, but I don't want to do it in one go. And I kind of walked her through my framework, walked her through why. And I mean, this is a question, it's not in isolation. I get this quite often from individuals like herself who they ultimately are going to need multiple fat loss phases to achieve that end goal, as well as individuals who, frankly, they just can't see themselves. They're like, I want to keep dieting. I want to keep pushing it. We're so close to that end goal. And even though they might be very, very lean and at the point where it's like, okay, what are we actually doing? We're deciding between you being 14% body fat and 12% body fat. Like there's not a huge difference here. And I find myself in this position where I'm like, okay, I can look back at my first prep and I can look back at the reverse diets that I did. I can look back at different fat loss phases that I've gone into where I very much I had the same mindset of, well, what's the harm in just muscling through it, just getting to the finish line, just getting to that final target weight or target body fat percentage. And there was a time where I was very naive and I just did it anyway. I just put the blinders on and just kept going. Um, and I had to learn the hard way. That isn't actually in your best interest. There are some pretty stark cutoffs that you should adhere to for the most part. I mean, like a week or two over under, that's fine. But there is an amount of time that definitively, objectively, the diet is not serving you. The diet is now causing detriment. It's causing un undue stress. It's no longer offering the same benefit, or at least maybe it is offering the same benefit, but at what cost? So that's what we're talking about today. How long can you diet for? And yeah, I'm going to break it down and hopefully give you something to chew on if maybe you're in the middle of a diet. If you've been dieting for a long time and you're frustrated, you're like, okay, I'm so far still from my target goal, but I don't know what to do. Like, do I just give up? Is it weak to give up? That's who this video is for. I want to offer you some reassurance, some guidance on this because I can tell you, being self-coached majority of my bodybuilding career, it, there's been a lot of that deliberation, a lot of that back and forth of like, is this just me? Like, am I just being soft? Am I just weak? Should I just like, I don't know, tough it out? And there are times, yes, absolutely, where the answer was just embrace the suck, commit to finishing either way, and then learn from it. But there were times, gosh, I could have saved myself a lot of makeup work, a lot of dietary debt if I had someone in my corner, in this case, like just telling me, like, hey, you you're falling victim to the sunk cost fallacy. We should wrap it at this point. So let's dive in. So my belief relative to total amount of time spent dieting, the hard limit, it's not that fat loss, like the metabolic process stops at a certain number of weeks. It's something that you're going to have to actively decide. Hey, I want to discontinue. I want to opt out. And this should occur when the cost of continuing to diet outweighs the benefit. Now, really the most honest way to answer this is that as you diet, um, as long as recovery, adherence, and physiological stability are intact, you're probably in the green. Now, that doesn't in itself encompass how lean you are, whether or not there is a higher risk of muscle loss. And well, like, I really want to stress this. There isn't a hard set number. So I'm going to give you a number. I'm going to tell you, hey, this amount of weeks and it starts to get dicey. But no, this can change depending on context, depending on how long you've been sorry, how much weight you've lost, depending on how lean you've gotten, depending on how lean you started at. There is a point where fat loss, it doesn't figuratively outweigh the cost of sustaining the deficit. Now, you have to think about this. Like, if someone is losing 1 pound per week, that means they're in a 500 calorie deficit. So I look at this, I'm like, okay, relative to the total amount of their weight that they're losing, really, when we start dipping above 15, 20%, this starts to become dicey because you're talking about a significant amount of weight. And I would say for most people, like right around that 20, 25, 30 pound mark, 30 pound being like the ultimate upper end, that's really where I'll say, like, I don't feel good about someone continuing that fat loss, even if adherence is strict, it's really tight, even if it seems like recovery is being managed well. I can say, like, the client that I was talking about at the beginning, her adherence was, I would say, like, very much like B plus, A minus, like, which is fantastic for losing about 30 pounds, like, over, like, a very reasonable amount of time. But I could see, like, and she was very honest, and she had a lot of ownership around, "Hey, I'm starting to have aspects of dietary fatigue. I'm starting to have, um, not I'm not losing control, but I can feel really the thoughts and the compulsions to overeat in these settings where I'm intentionally supposed to eat more." And that's very different than what I felt at the beginning of the diet. So I want to make you aware of it, Corey. And I'm so glad that she did, because a lot of people, they can just disassociate and be like, no, like, I'm going to tough it out. I was just being a weak, I was just like being really whiny, or like I lacked I don't know. I just need to like lock in. And I'm like, Yeah, you might, and that might be the story we need to tell ourselves at certain points, but there is a point where you being honest and, like, naming how you're feeling, if that's what's actually going on, it's not a weakness, it's crucial information. So, of course, like, people, they probably clicked on this video and they're like, "How many fucking weeks?" Corey, just say it. 20 to 25 weeks. That's the too long, didn't read, I'm not watching this whole video answer at 13 minutes in, give or take. But again, it's very relative, because if you have someone that is, let's say, starting at 18% body fat and they're losing at that, let's say, average rate of loss of 1 pound per week, even point 0.8, if you have them dieting for 20, 25 weeks, even including a diet break, and maybe even two diet breaks, that's a tremendous amount of weight they're losing, and that very easily, if they're consistently losing, that could take them, I would say, closer to like 10, 12%, maybe even more. I don't know. The math is escaping me right now. Someone do it for me in the comments. But you get the point. Like, if we're taking someone who's starting at 30%, they diet for 20 weeks, they lose 20 pounds. I mean, like, obviously depending on what their body fat percentage, sorry, depending on what their muscle mass was to start the diet, like, if they lost some muscle, if they held on to some muscle, that exact number is going to shift. But the point is, like, based on body fat percentage, this number can be a little more forgiving. The amount of time that someone diets can be a little more forgiving, but still to a certain point. And I really want to stress this. This is under the pretense that recovery is being managed, adherence is locked in, that they aren't starting to have any like disordered food behaviors, because those are all things, like, even if technically we plan for the diet to be 20 weeks, if someone really is struggling with these things, I'm going to have it in my peripherals and be like, we're running out of runway. Like, we're burning through it, whether you realize it or not. Your skill of dieting might not allow you to diet at this pace for the next 20 weeks. So we might have to end it at 15. We might have to slow the rate of loss, so the total amount of weight you're going to lose is going to be collectively less. So I would say the best way to go about this in your case is, like, if you're asking yourself, like, hey, Corey, I came to this video to figure out How long should I spend dieting? How long can I spend dieting before it becomes detrimental? The hard line in the sand, I'm gonna say, is, like, around that 25-week mark, but again, it largely depends on how well you're tolerating the diet. I can say I have tolerated a tremendous amount of weight loss in a contest prep. I've gotten incredibly lean in very unfavorable environments with a lot of stress on my plate, like overall allostatic load. It made it more difficult than it needed to be. I can say other diets, they have been a walk in the park. They have been so easy just because I was managing stress better. I was very diligent about setting boundaries around sleep and the emotional toll that different things in my life were taking. So, if you're someone who in your life at this point, like you got a lot of things pulling you in different directions, you don't have a lot to give, you don't have a lot of bandwidth, this total duration of dieting, it might be less because you might find that you blow through the runway faster. You might find that the dietary fatigue accrues faster. And this is where I should probably back up because I know for some of you, you're like, uh, I don't know what these words mean. I don't know what runway means. I don't know what dietary fatigue means. So let me just give you some definitions. So hopefully this clears that up. Dietary fatigue, that is the stress that comes from simply being in the diet. It can be physical, it can be psychological, and it typically doesn't announce itself. It's not something that you're gonna be like, oh, today I'm noticing a 20% increase in dietary fatigue. What this looks like, how this presents hunger, it increases, satiation probably goes down. Food noise becomes louder. Maybe there is more of this obsession and I don't particularness with how you eat, when you eat, what you eat. Your mood can become less stable. You can become a little, hangry, a little snappier. Sleep becomes lighter. Libido declines. You can feel colder. Training performance softens. And small deviations, they land harder. There's a bigger impact here. It becomes harder to get back on track. Now, as this fatigue accumulates, adherence becomes more fragile. Now, hear me when I say this, like just being non-adherent, it doesn't mean that you have a tremendous amount of dietary fatigue, but if you would, I don't know, introspectively be like, hey, going to a wedding, there's like a 90% chance I'm going to go off track and I'm going to completely binge. And this could even be like, if I have cookies in the house, there's a high chance. Like, it's really the predictability, the rate, I don't know, the chance I don't know, the chance that you're gonna fuck this off, you're just gonna go off track, um, because I can say for a lot of people, they will tough it out, they'll be like, "No, I just have to push through, I just have to be good, I have to be good, I have to be good," until they can't, until they break, and it's a big concept that I preach to my clients, that I preach to you guys, is that, like, that dietary fatigue, let's say you being on the cusp of binging is the red, but the orange is like, okay, well, you know you wanna eat the food, but you can control yourself, but you're gonna be pissed off about it. You're not gonna be happy about it, and over time, if this happens persistently, it's gonna be an issue. Eventually, you are gonna break. Maybe it takes, I don't know, 5 instances for you to finally cave. That's the orange, and then the yellow is like, okay, you're aware that you wanna eat more, maybe you have some negative feelings about it, but it's gonna take a certain amount of times and exposure before you actually cave. So I always tell people, I'm like, we wanna catch dietary fatigue, we wanna catch it when it's in the yellow progressing to the orange. I think yellow is a very, like, common state you're gonna probably live in. I can tell you, I love food. I love cooking. I like going out to eat. I love sharing food experiences. I like highly palatable food. I like food with high fat. I like food that is fried or cooked in oil. But I also know in the instance that I have a very strict goal, I'm also trying to make sure that these instances where I am having these highly palatable foods, these high calorie foods, I know that there's a trade off and I can kind of walk myself through it of like, well, hey, guy, you can want it. You can know that you would enjoy it, but you can also have the foresight to know that this isn't aligned with your goals. I wouldn't even consider that yellow. That is just I don't know, that's just being an adult, that's just being mature, that's just saying like, "Hey, I'm I'm going to make this decision consciously. I'm going to be an active participant here and decide that I don't want to do maybe what impulse I have at the moment. Now, when this becomes harder and harder to manage, when this becomes something that consistently you start to let those emotions spiral into, I don't get this because I can't lose weight and I don't deserve it. When it starts to create the, I don't know, take off and build this narrative around like, this has to do with my value as a person and what I deserve and what I'm allowed to have. When you start using weird language like that internally, and that's where you gotta be honest about what the hell feelings you have, what thoughts are coming up. But if those, like, I mean, they're irrational thoughts, but if they're coming up for you and you're not refuting them, if you are not countering them, that's going to become the narrative. That's going to become what you start to believe. And that's ultimately one of the ways that the dietary fatigue on the psychological front gets exacerbated, starts to become this like state of like, well, I can't go to this party. I can't go out on a date. I can't go hang out with friends because I know that like I'm pretty weak because I have these desires to eat off plan. And like we want to snuff that. We don't want to feed into that bullshit as it happens. You want to refute it and root it in logic and be like, hey, it's very human to want food that is delicious and higher calorie. And I'm eating less than I am burning. So at this point, why wouldn't I want this food? Like, if you can like put your boss bitch hat on and just be like, this makes complete sense. It's completely understandable. I'm not gonna beat myself up over it. Like, I promise, like, that's your defense against these negative food behavior thoughts. So, when it comes to actually accumulating dietary fatigue, the thing I wanna stress here, you're not weak for, like, not being able to be a robot. Like, you're not weak for being human. That's what I'm trying to say is that, like, it's very normal. And, like, the more grace you can give yourself, it doesn't mean like rationalize binging or going off track. It doesn't mean like giving yourself like, oh no, here's the reason why. And like, let me say this. Let me explain this better. There's the ability to have grace and be like, "Hey, like I messed up and I'm going to do better. This isn't a reflection of who I am as a person or my work ethic." There's the ability to do that without exaggerating or minimizing the instance. It's when you start minimizing the instance and you're like, well, yeah, like this is a justification when you start like slipping that in of like, well, here's the reason why this is okay moving forward. That's where it starts to, I don't know, take flight and become a different kind of issue. So let me just reorient and get back on track because I have the exact questions that I know you're probably wanting me to talk about and not be so tangential. So I kind of went into the psychological burnout, I dug into that heavy, but then there's the physiological burnout, which, sorry, one thing I want to say on the psychological burnout still is like, this is why we need a target rate of change. This is the reason that I tell people, I'm like, if we're in a fat loss phase, we need to lose fat, okay? We need to not be dicking around, dragging our feet, dipping our toe into the diet. That whole like slow fat loss bullshit of I'm gonna recomp, like, I promise you, you're probably not going to. I promise you, you're probably more trained or trained enough in a way that you're not gonna be that person who just like, I built 5 pounds of muscle and lost 10 pounds of fat. Like you're probably it's a very, very small sliver of the population who can do that. Like I had a girl who came to me, she never lifted weights before. She was like, I know I need to lose weight, but I'm really interested in like sculpting a physique, putting on some muscle. My experience as far as training goes is I've done Pilates. Like I've done Pilates, I've done yoga. I have not touched a weight. I do not have a gym membership. Where do I start? She is going to recomp. She is going to build muscle because that is literally day one in the gym. Would she build more muscle if we weren't losing fat? Probably. Yes, but the newbie gains are fresh for her. It's probably not you. And this is the whole concept. Like you can already tell. It pisses me off because I was this person. I was like, we're going to do it slow and steady so it's sustainable. But what happens is dietary fatigue, it accrues whether you lose fat or not. You believe you're in a diet because that is the reality you're living in. So if you're not losing fat and you're letting dietary fatigue accrue, that runway, that amount of time that you can spend dieting, that is winding down. Like you only have a certain amount of time before you fucking snap and you're like, I don't want to diet anymore. We want to end the diet before you get to that point. But the important thing is the thing that is such a game changer. It was a game changer for myself. It's been a game changer for a lot of clients who've experienced this frustration is we need to make sure you're actually making the most of this time in a deficit. Because whether you lose fat or not, your body is clocking it that you are owed some kind of return. You are owed some kind of benefit from all of your sacrifices and your efforts. This is why. This is why people come to me. I have a client right now. We just started prep, and she assured me, she's like, I struggle to lose fat the first 4 to 6 weeks. My last coach, a problem that we had, she didn't change my calories. She just left me in this purgatory. And then I'm like, yo, like now I have to make up this fat loss. We got to push my show back. And it became this thing. I'm like, what are we waiting on? What are we waiting on to happen? And I told her, I was like, don't you worry, honey. I don't do that. Like I'll give you 2 weeks at most, but that's gonna be if you push me to do that, like, and really what's gonna happen is I'm gonna say, there's not really a drawback with increasing your deficit slightly, because let's say it was artificially inflated, the rate of change this week, and that's why you didn't lose weight. If we increase the deficit, guess what? That swoosh is gonna come off, whether it's because your menstrual cycle, maybe it's because you didn't poop, maybe it's because I don't know, you started working out harder, now you're holding more inflammation, you didn't sleep. There's so many reasons that weight can just fluctuate and be higher than it actually is. But I was like, I've done this before. I've been in this state where I started a diet, nothing happened, and I was like, cool. We can either wait, but if we are wrong, if you're not actually in the deficit that you think you're in, all this is going to do is put us back another week. So why don't we just increase the deficit? And then we pushed a little bit harder in the part of the diet, in the phase of fat loss where it's the easiest, i.e., when you are fatter. When you are leaner, it is harder to lose weight. So for all those people who are like, I'm not going to turn it up until the very end. I'm not going to really start to apply myself until I see the striations, until I know we're in the home stretch. I'm telling you, that is the opposite of what we should at the very beginning, when it's boring, when you feel like nothing's happening, when you're like, I'm not really any different, even though the pound, even though the scale says I'm lighter, that's the time to push. That's the time to grind and to be like, no, we're going to get this fat off. It gets harder the leaner you get because dietary fatigue accrues. So somehow we're 30 minutes in and I just talked about psychological dietary fatigue for, I don't know, 25 minutes. So the physiological side of this, I know I kind of went into it, but like sleep disruptions, noticing in training that like generally you're just fucking tanked. Like it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you time most of your carbs before your workout. You just know you're like, I'm fucked today. Like it's gonna be a really hard session to get through. So I gotta do what I can. But even then, like my expectations are a lot lower. Uh, like I said, the mood instability again, like we can, I don't know, we can classify that as more the psychological aspect. The hunger signaling, the satiation, I can tell you the leanest I got, like when I did my prep in 22, I was on my maybe this was 21. I don't know. Both I got incredibly lean, but I remember on the way to one of my shows, like I was like driving to Arizona and I was eating like cold ass 99.1 with like lettuce and like ponzu. Ponzu was fire. But I was like, I finished the meal and I was like, I could eat this meal 4 more times and I don't think I would be full. Like immediately, I just want to repeat this again. And it doesn't even have to be desirable. And that was like a wake up call for me. I was like, oh, like dietary fatigue is quite high, as it should have been. I was like, I was under 15% body fat for a while. So I'll just say, when you're noticing hunger signaling, and this is like not necessarily the food cravings, but truly like, hey, like I'm getting uncomfortably hungry and it's not subsiding when I drink a little bit of water. It's not subsiding when I distract myself. The satiation aspect of it. Are you finding that even as soon as you finish a meal, even like a very reasonable micronutrient dense meal, it's still hard for you to like move on and be like, great, I gotta wait 3 to 4 hours. Some of this is expected. We want to catch it before it becomes so much of an issue that you don't know how to navigate it other than just end the diet, opt out. So both components matter, both aspects, psychological fatigue and physiological. We we have to also scale the amount of time spent dieting. Sorry, let me say this again. We also have to scale the amount of time that you spend dieting according to your skill of dieting. So I'll say, like the client I was speaking about at the beginning, she's someone, her skill of dieting, not incredibly high. So there was a level of cushion that I'm gonna give her. Like if we don't lose at the appropriate rate, it's like, yeah, but you still were adherent. Like we're not gonna apply more pressure for someone that for the first time in their life, like they're seeing consistent progress week over week. If she misses a little bit cardio, not the end of the world. And that's really like that's the kind of the art of being a coach is knowing when to apply pressure, when to apply and how much pressure should you apply, who is going to actually thrive and be better for that pressure applied, and who is going to collapse. What are the times where even if the rate of loss doesn't changes, like we hold, we don't increase the deficit, we don't ask more of the client. And that's really where the subjective feedback is so important, because I can say for a lot of people, they just want to focus on the rate of change. They just want to focus on the timeline and be like, well, yeah, this is what you said I should be at. And because I'm not, that tells me we should probably decrease food. And it's like, yes, but if just holding for another week, even if we miss out on that rate of loss, if that keeps you in this longer, if that keeps you from spiraling and having an even worse week, that 100% is the answer. Like the whole art aspect of coaching comes down to knowing when to push, when to hold, when to pull, when holding is actually the right thing to do, when applying more pressure would actually be more detrimental to the client and to their progress. Now, there's a few ways that we can manage this dietary fatigue. We can implement a higher calorie day that is controlled, that's very like tightly regimented and predictable. This is called a refeed or a higher calorie day, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But in this case, what you need to understand, what should be understood, like the client should be privy to this, is that if we're raising calories by 500 for one day, let's say, we're reducing the deficit by 500 for the week. So it's expected to not see an increase in the rate, in increase or even like steady rate of loss compared to what you would normally expect without the refeed. This is where a lot of people go wrong is they want to do the refeed. They want to do it really early on before dietary fatigue is actually accrued. And a lot of it comes down to just not realizing that like refeeds are not magic. You're not going to just force fat loss. And truly, like at the end of the day, it is calories in, calories out. So if we are decreasing the deficit by proxy, unless like the day after you really expend yourself, you train so much harder, or this refeed causes you to be that much more adherent, which even then is not like, again, it's not magic. Like really, like from my from my perspective, I see the purpose of a refeed is to reduce some of that dietary fatigue, to put someone in a position where they can continue the diet without needing an untracked meal, without needing a cheat meal, without needing a diet break, or without needing to end the diet in itself in its entirety. Now, diet breaks, cheat meals. Cheat meals, I think they can be used, but this is more so for the individual who's either A, losing too fast, and even then, I would say, like, there's still a way to do that with tracking calories, but largely where I see the benefit for cheat meals is gonna be the individual who really needs that psychological relief. Like, they're finding they're like, "Hey, like, the fact I can't go out with my husband, the fact I can't go out with my kids, like, it's really getting to me at this point, and I'm gonna break if I continue down this path." No client has ever said that to me. No client really, I think, feels comfortable, like, owning that statement and being like, this is what I need. So can we do this? And if not, I need a justification. I need an alternative. For most people, this is something that I, the coach, like I recognize, I see in their reporting, I see in their check-ins, and I'm like, you would actually benefit from this. And it's very subtle, but there are tells when someone's in this state where it's like, you need to just unscrew the cap a little bit. Like it has very like, yeah, it has some to do with the calorie increase, but psychologically, you're just like, you're really weighed down right now. Now, it's also in this case that we have to consider when is the appropriate time to use a diet break? So I'll say for most clients, I implement a diet break like I have it pre-planned anywhere from week 5 to week 10. And this comes from this idea that like if someone says like they're an easy client, they don't struggle with adherence, okay, well let's actually test that. Let's see because they might find that like what I'm going to ask of them is actually much greater than what they anticipated. And it's not uncommon to have someone start a diet and then we start to see how they actually execute and realize that, okay, there are some real, like major pain points that are making adherence hard. So they would actually benefit from having a little bit of a breather, having this pause. And that essentially, that's what the diet break is. It's still controlled, it's still tracked. I prefer if someone does their diet break and they do not change their food selection. Some people will put diet break on their timeline and they'll just be like, "Oh, I thought you meant like I can just not follow any diet, like I can just eat whatever I want." No, not not the intention here, and truly, I would say, like, what is gonna offer the most benefit is having someone still be strict with adherence, but intentionally, because it's prescribed, eating anywhere from 3 to 500 calories more every day for that week. It doesn't mean that I mean, like, yes, in objectively, we're reducing the deficit, but the idea isn't like, "Hey, we're gonna gain muscle this week, we're gonna gain weight." It's really just to pull them out of the deficit or reduce it to some extent to give them the ability to pause and maybe even start to recognize, okay, what were the adaptive components? What are the changes physiologically that you might not have wanted to admit that now you feel like on the other side, you're like, okay, I'm eating a little bit more. Yeah, I actually was getting kind of snappy with my husband the last couple weeks, whatever it might be. And I get it because I'm not the kind of person like when I've worked with coaches, I never wanted to admit whenever I was struggling with the diet, I never wanted to talk about the emotional side. I never wanted to be like, hey, like I found it really hard. I was probably really close to going off track last night. That feels embarrassing. It feels like, it's something, I don't know, something to feel shame over. But I'm telling you, if you are working with someone who cares about your best interest and has a good handle on like, yeah, like I get it. I've been there. They're not going to meet you with punishment. They're not going to negatively reinforce your honesty. They're going to actually see the value in you owning it and letting them know, making them aware. And it breaks my heart when I hear girls, they're like, yeah, like I told my coach, this, and then like she said, maybe you're not a bodybuilder, maybe you're not cut out for this sport. Like you're you're allowed to make mistakes, you're allowed to not be perfect. I'm not enabling or saying like, "Yeah, just do it intuitively." Like, no, like I hold my clients to a very high standard, I hold myself to a high standard, but it is not a bad thing to own and to even clarify like, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. Help me." Like that's essentially what that is communicating is that I fell into this. I don't know why. I don't want to make the same mistake again. So how do I navigate it differently? What are some tools? What are some things that you've used in the past that have helped you? And it really it's a shame when coaches kind of meet clients with this like, well, you just have to get back on track and like do it again and not break. You just have to be tougher. You have to think about how badly you want it. It's like, yes, like that's I don't know. That's very surface level. It's very shallow, but isn't there a reason that this happened? Because it probably wasn't the first time that you were close to going off track. It probably wasn't the first time that you had a craving or an impulse. What was the thing that you gave into? I mean, you fell victim to whatever, like, but you decided like, okay, it's no longer worth exercising this discipline because I don't know, when I started to shift that framework away from like, well, no, it just happened and I blacked out and I just did it. When I started to like really dissect and reflect on like, no, this was very specific to the situation I was in, to the thoughts I was having, up until a single thought. And I was good. Like I was holding it together. And then I had this one thought. And maybe that thought was super heavy. Maybe that one belief, like you just caved and you're like, yeah, you know what? I am really weak. I'm never going to make it to stage. Or, you know what? Even if I do all this, like he's not going to give me more attention. He's not going to love me better. Like I'm still going to be in the same situation whatever it is. And I really do think like the thoughts, the things that cause us to deviate, I usually think that I usually find It's inadvertently, it's a form of self-sabotage. It's just your brain trying to seek comfort and predictability, which when you look at it, it's like, okay, if you cheat on your diet, if you go off track, if you binge, that creates probably a predictable state that you've been in before that allows you a lot of control then over the outcome. Even though it really doesn't, even though what it does create is a lot of chaos and anxiety, maybe that's what you're used to. Maybe that's what you're craving is that, like, yeah, it's actually way more uncomfortable to follow this, see it go perfectly, and not know when I'm going to go off the rails, when I'm going to mess up. It's like for people who like to have a lot of control, for people who are really neurotic, I can say this is a super common theme is it's a lot easier to just self-sabotage and you don't realize you're doing it. It's not like a conscious like, yeah, I'm going to fuck this diet up. It's one of those things where you're just like, the thing that I want is to be able to control the outcome. I want that even more than the possibility of something new because that's scary. That might mean that I have to follow this stupid diet for a lot longer than I thought. It might mean that I have to face different challenges or face the reality that it was this easy. Now, what about the individual who is at the point where they don't know, like, should I just end this? Should I tap out because I'm not making progress? I'm not moving in the right direction. This is really hard and I'm feeling worse and worse and worse. There absolutely is a point where you should end the phase entirely. You should no longer diet, even if the plan was another 5 weeks, even if you had a show and you've already committed to it. There is a good reason to end the diet. And typically, what this looks like is the inability to turn it back around, the inability to pivot. And I'll say, like with adherence, like I kind of use this term like speed wobbles. When you fuck up just once and you're like, okay, but that was incidental, like it's not going to happen again. It was in isolation. Cool. We can move on from it. But if it becomes a repeated pattern, especially in the case where it's like, hey, I went into the pantry and I binged because I was stressed out and I bought things and I just kept them in the house because someone else in the house wants to eat them, but also I love eating them. And then you find yourself repeatedly going back and having that, same episode and doing that same behavior. If you're not able to correct it, we need to take a pause. And it doesn't, in this case, it doesn't even mean end the diet. It might mean pull yourself out of the deficit for a temporary period of time. We got to get a handle on it. And that's the reality is asking more of yourself in a state where you don't have a lot of willpower, you don't have a lot of discipline is rarely a solution. And it typically is going to put you in a position where you just continue feel like you're banging your head against the wall and like you're still not getting results. And it's like at a certain point, you have to accept, like, hey, I might be at the end of my rope. I might need to ease off the gas and just recalibrate, resettle before I enter the diet again. Maybe that's the case, but what about for the individual that truly, I mean, like their sleep is so disrupted, they're disinterested in their partner and things that they used to enjoy. They have no libido, no energy. They're very snappy. They're very emotionally food driven and like locked on just planning their next meal and how to get more out of their next meal. I mean, these are all signs that to me, I'm like, okay, dietary fatigue has reached and maybe even grown past the point that you can tolerate. There's not a lot we can do. And this is kind of what I was referring to as before is like the red. If that's the point we're getting into, the answer is probably not to reverse out of it. It's probably not to increase calories by 50 calories that week. It's probably not to take 5 minutes away from cardio. It's probably that you need a refresher. You need to be a little more supported from a caloric standpoint, but an energy availability standpoint. So you probably need to just come right back to maintenance. And for a lot of people, the idea of that's so scary because they're like spent all this time and put all this effort into losing this weight. So how do I just accept the fact that I'm not going to continue losing at this point? You have to have the foresight to know that like you can keep trying to lose, but you're going to hit a floor. You're going to hit a point where you're no longer able to lose because adherence is slowly dwindling more and more. You start to develop these patterns of overeating, undereating, over restricting. You start to use cardio as a crutch. You start to do things that are very dysregulated. Like it's very like objectively, if you saw someone else, someone you loved, a girlfriend, family member, sister, if you saw her doing this, you'd be like, you need you need a burger, you need to eat, you need to sleep, like you need to take some time off of just white knuckling this. And a lot of people they think they're like, okay, maintenance means I'm going to gain a bunch of fat. The fuck it does. Like if you are at maintenance, you're not going to gain anything. So maybe the idea of being at maintenance, maybe the idea is very scary. Maybe the idea of not being in a deficit is very scary. But let me tell you, what does that indicate? Is that like this belief that like you're going to have to diet the rest of your life? That's not where you want to live. That's not where you should be. If you're at that point, we need to tweak some things. We need to recalibrate your understanding of why we're dieting and also what a maintenance or a structured build can actually look like. So, when we're talking about going to maintenance, I can tell you I have no intention of taking my clients after a fat loss phase and then just having them gain a bunch of fat. That is not what the fuck we're doing. We are bringing food up 3 to 500 calories, making sure that weight holds, making sure you don't gain. And lo and behold, for a lot of people, what you'll find an immense amount of stress comes off. So it's trickery, it's magic, yeah, but I've done this with so many clients where I know they're scale sensitive. I know it's going to be hard for them, even if they do not gain weight, even if they lose weight, it's going to be hard for them to increase food because of that historical ingrained belief that it's going to cause them to gain fat. So, we don't increase exponentially. We don't increase untracked meals. We don't take cardio to zero, but we put them in a position that's more favorable physiologically so that they can thrive and see, look, weight didn't go up. Nothing actually changed because you're truly at maintenance. And in a lot of cases, people are going to people are going to do one or two things. People's adherence is either going to increase when we raise food because they're terrified of gaining weight, which actually is in their favor. They might actually find that, hey, it's tighter than when they ended the fat loss phase. So maybe they continue losing weight, even at a slower rate. Or B, they're going to assume that any weight gained is purely muscle. Now, for this individual, we have to unpack this. We have to explain that, like, muscle, it does take, like, I mean, we're talking about from adaptation to actually seeing new muscle. It's going to take like 4 weeks. It's not going to be overnight. Any slight fluctuation, it is probably not true muscle gain. Muscle building is a slow process, especially for individuals who are not enhanced. So when we're really like dictating and like setting out, okay, what's the goal of this non-fat loss phase? It's A, to let off and decrease some of that dietary fatigue, let off some steam, unscrew the cap. But B, it's intentionally, we're trying to take you to a point metabolically, calorically, where you can start to reflect on the fat loss phase and really assess what are the things I did well? What are the things I didn't do well? If I want to get leaner than I did this time, what were the things that prevented me from doing that? And now we're in this state where you're a little more fed, training performance is likely going to go up, and we can really start to make moves to build that skill of dieting. And that's really the thing. I think it derails a lot of people. They end a fat loss phase and they're like, well, I don't have a goal, so it's not really motivating at this point. And I get it. It's not the same. Like you have this constant hit of dopamine every time you see a new low weigh-in, every time you check in and you see new visual, changes. But what you have to remember is like there were things that you could probably do better in the fat loss phase. There are things that made certain weeks harder than others. When you start improving on the skills of dieting, when you start really closing those gaps, addressing those bottlenecks, that is going to set you up for an easier time the next time that you diet. That's what your goal should be. Your next pre-prep, pre-fat loss phase, whatever you want to call it, it starts after you end the diet. You can start to reorient, you can start to undo and reverse some of these dysregulated behaviors, which like I can tell you, like if you weren't able to get as lean as you needed to because you don't have as much muscle, Beautiful. Now, the answer is to build muscle. So, that is your objective goal. Your goal is to put yourself in a position where you don't have to get unreasonably lean to look the way that you want to. I know it can be hard to have that foresight. It can be hard to exercise that delayed gratification because that's essentially what the non dieting phase is. And the point in which you're no longer able to see the positives and really, like, I don't know, be present mentally in the diet when you start to feel burnt out, when you start to feel like it's not worth it, you're at the point that dietary fatigue is too high. And it doesn't mean you have to gain 20 pounds. It doesn't mean you have to commit to a 20-week build or anything like that. It just means you need to spend time in a non-fat loss phase. You need to spend time not dieting. There's so much benefit, so much merit to spending time here and getting better, improving that skill set so that the next diet goes off a little bit better. Y'all, I hope you like this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.